Hello, this Dev Diary is going to cover the second week on uh, my home game Nest, which is a 4-week production. In the last week, Jacob and I have done a lot of documentation and we've pitched to 3 different studio groups: Animation 2, Animation 3, and Audio 2. But funnily enough, most of my responses have come from posting um, that GIF of the environment to Facebook, inviting others to join. And we have 2 Studio One animators that are very interested. This is the project plan, and it also incorporates a task tracker. I put it to Jacob whether or not he wanted to use Hack and Plan or our own spreadsheet, and he preferred this spreadsheet for accessibility purposes. I've changed it quite a lot. I can now filter by due date so that we can work from top to bottom, and I've started to stagger the due dates a little more so that there's one average task due each day of the week, and they go purple if you're behind. And in the logged hours column, I'm shading it red based on the amount of hours you spent on something. For example, I got really upset at Jacob, and I apologize. It was not really cool. I got upset at him for losing his focus. He spent way too long. I've actually logged much less than what he said he spent on this. So he and I have the same problem where we tend to obsess and spend way too long on something that interests us. And for Jacob, I've now learned that that's a low-level functionality. He wants to be a software developer. He's not too interested in games. He's very interested in low-level code and making really elegant scripts. So all we need is, I guess, gentle reminders, each of us, about what's important and what's priority at this point in the project. Since last week, I've added a schedule to the project plan with objectives for each week. I don't think this is too necessary except for my own planning, because Jacob and I can really have some good one-on-one conversations about what we can do and what needs to be done next in each of our weekly team meetings after school on Monday and on Fridays. This is the asset list for the animators. It links back to the project plan, the art bible, and the Discord channel for real-time chat. We've been sharing images of our progress, and it's really helping to inspire each other. It's a really good idea to have that team chat available to the whole team, all the collaborators, so that we can all share our work and see this thing come together, because when we've just gone away separately, it's easy to stress about how far along the game is and getting it all done. But I've just been maybe every 3 days just asking how everyone's going, what they're up to, and yeah, they haven't logged it here, but they've shared their concept sheets, and they've even done a couple of models, and yeah, the concept sheets look great. I'm really, really excited about this. I mean, if they hadn't shared that stuff with me, if I hadn't asked, if I hadn't gently pushed for some kind of feedback and sharing, I wouldn't be so excited now about getting this cool stuff that they've got into a game. So that's the animation. You can sort by category, that is model or animation, and the type. And I've sorted the highest priority as just the bird and the flapping, gliding, and standing, with the idea that if I'm strapped for time and animating a flying controller, it's been a lot of work, by the way. If that's too much, I can just have like a little Minecraft mob jumping animation for walking, and then just handle the animation controller for idle or stand, gliding, and flapping. Already that's a bit of work. Moving between different control schemes is also work. I've been tearing my hair out over that. Let's look at the audio. I think the most important here are the hunger indicators for the nest and yourself, as well as giving that audio feedback when you do something good, when you increase your energy, and just the basics of the physics. So the first interactable objects will be like fish, and so I wanted to have the bare minimum, like the sounds of like flesh being dropped onto rock, and the interactable objects that you find exploring will be like these glowing crystals that give you heaps of energy. And so I wanted that like that crystal dropping sound, which I'm imagining will sound like breaking glass or something. I've used some words here, but like Rose says, audio is hard to describe. There are so many words you could use, and then there's always more, because it's so hard to communicate an idea that you have for audio. Rose, the audio lecturer, gave us a little presentation last week on how to communicate with audio students, and she taught us about Foley, which is just all the noises on the screen. And in movies, usually it's not actually what's there on the screen, because let's say the camera's pulled right back. You can't have a mic boom recording the effects on the screen, because it would get in the way. So all that stuff is recorded separately and added in, just like a video game. So since last Dev Diary, I've split the concept document into a high concept doc and a feature spec doc, just to make this FSD easier for Jacob to read, because he's responsible for translating this into the TSD. Because he tends to, like me, lose focus and obsess about making an elegant feature. If he doesn't plan before he starts scripting, it's just a huge time sink. So he might be really grumpy about doing this, and I hate pushing people, but planning is what makes things go smoothly. You can tell if something's not going to work, usually just by planning it. And then you can plan differently. But you don't want to get halfway through a huge script like a player controller and realize that the logic is flawed from the ground up. Lastly, I don't know if I showed the art Bible. It did have a bunch of pictures in it for inspirations and the style, but I cut them all out because there's really not much text here, and I don't want. I mean, I imagined reading this art Bible as an animator, and I would have just scrolled through looking at the pictures, because that's the easiest way to get an idea about what someone wants. But I thought I should leave it as an example of the scene that I've already spent way too long on, what it looks like, and hopefully they produce something that matches based on the notes here. I've added a palette as so I've said, it's not a restriction. We just want to move away from the common colors for life on Earth. After discussion with one of the animators, I mean, I've already got this magenta theme all over. If there was some reds and greens in there, it would look very unnatural. Even for this alien world. So I've moved the animation references to the the team folder so they can have a look at them if they want, but they're not clogging up the art Bible. These slides I've cut from a GDC presentation by Ethan Red this year. I'm not sure yet. Yeah, this year. Really good talk. I like this dispersal method a lot more than the accumulation. As it says here, they've each got 800 tries in the scene, but this looks a lot better because the tries are spread out through the world and there's consistency. This isn't necessarily bad. It really depends on what you're going for, but I like this. So I don't really want like this super bare environment and then a high poly creature walking around in it. It's going to look like a prototype game. Whereas if we really push the animators to make super low poly stuff, and I don't have to do too much work putting low poly props into the world, that is just a low res height mesh, I think it's going to all flow nicely. I can use increased density of objects to lead the viewer towards certain areas. So if I want to spawn an object of interest, I'll spawn a whole bunch of terrain props around that kind of lead the viewer towards it. Ethan Red calls that breadcrumbing. Yeah, I think Ethan's talk is called Low Poly Style Through Economy or something like that. Just search Low Poly GDC, you'll get it. But really worth the watch if you have any interest in low poly, which as a student I certainly do. And like pixel art, it makes every vert more meaningful, which I think is really cool. In my next video, I will show you how much game we have. We don't quite have the core loop ironed out yet. It's kind of buggy, but we didn't force text serialization until just recently, so we didn't realize we were overriding a whole bunch of binary files in our repo. So that's a really important one to remember. Force text serialization in Unity. Actually, I might bring that up now whilst we're talking about collaboration and documentation. I think it's really important to do this in your first push. So if we go edit, project settings, editor, I'll just bring this across here. We can see the editor settings over here. We want to take the asset serialization mode from mixed or forced binary to forced text. That way, if I bring up the repo, that way we can see changes to, let's say, a material file or a prefab file. We can see those changes as lines of text instead of as, use theirs or use mine, because that would be a binary overwrite. So if Jacob simply accidentally tweaked a value on this prefab, he wouldn't be overriding all the hard work I did to it. And we are doing that. We are using common prefabs on 2 different scenes, and if we're testing on the prefabs, we just don't save. But we can screw that up sometimes, and that's okay. But text serialization saves us from those screw-ups meaning anything. So, yeah. Force text if you're doing group work. Even if you're by yourself, it's going to help you out if you're working on 2 different computers and you forgot to push your work on one of them. You're not going to override it with old stuff that way. Alright, my next video will cover how much game we've got so far, and I'm really excited about that. So, thanks for listening.